Greetings, folks. My name is Rongwise Ganji, and welcome to Quick and Dirty Roleplaying. I want to continue where I left off in my last video, where I started talking about my history with the superhero RPG from Green Running Publishing, Mutants and Masterminds. For me, Mutants and Masterminds wasn't simply a D20 superhero RPG. It was an iteration of the D20 system that allowed me to create any character or creature that I wanted that was balanced. I say balanced in quotations, excuse me, because not only is perfect character balance a myth, even the way certain traits are priced can actually be quite unbalanced. One of the glaring examples to me in the first edition of Mutants and Masterminds was that 1 point of an ability score was worth the same as 1 skill rank, which comes out to a +2 on a particular skill check being equal to a +1 on a dice roll where said ability was relevant, which includes not only skills but saving throws and attack rolls. This was pretty disconcerting to me, but it was definitely more manageable than trying to reverse engineer D&D 3rd edition, since all that was required in the case of Mutants and Masterminds was to recalibrate point costs to the different abilities, skills, and powers. And speaking about powers, this is where the game truly shines. To me, Mutants and Masterminds had 90% of the flexibility and options of the hero system with a fraction of the complexity. If I recall correctly, the first edition of Mutants Masterminds didn't have the option to create a variable power pool, where you would have a pool of points on standby for you to assign to whatever powers fit the theme of your power set at a moment's notice. But it had alternate power feats, which allowed you to swap between powers that could not be used simultaneously, but at the cost of just 1 extra point. So a Green Lantern build was definitely viable in the first edition of Mutants and Masterminds. At the time, I think my main friend group had just recently gotten into D&D 3rd edition, despite my efforts to get them to do so and to drop AD&D 2nd edition beforehand. I was confident that selling Mutants and Masterminds was going to be very difficult to them. Well, it was going to be very difficult for me to do, but honestly I had to try. And try as I might, I failed to foster anything more than a out of them. A superhero RPG wasn't something that interested them, and the idea of having an alternative to D&D where they were not restricted by the options presented in the player's handbook didn't really appeal to them. If I recall correctly, and I'm not sure that I am, the idea of being able to emulate the characters they saw in anime, however, did somewhat appeal to them since they were tremendous fans of anime. Hell, they even played D&D as if it were an anime, despite the fact that the only anime that D&D can emulate is anime that's like D&D, such as Record of Lodoss War, but certainly not stuff like Naruto, Vampire Hunter D, or Ninja Scroll. Ironically enough, when they did make characters, some of them complained that certain powers were too overpowered. Hacks was the term used back at the time. It was 2 friends of mine that were bickering over each other's characters because one of them had incorporeality and invisibility, and the other one had mind control or telekinesis or some other power that allowed them to instantly deal damage if they could just perceive them. In this manner, the danger room scenarios that I used were counterproductive, and I think the thing that made them counterproductive was that I did danger room PvP. So it was like each player would make a character and would have them go up against each other. In any case, Mutants and Masterminds was a no-go with them, and they simply stuck with D&D 3rd edition. While I did purchase the Freedom City campaign setting for Mutants Masterminds 1st edition, which is awesome by the way, I never got to run the first edition of Mutants Masterminds. The art of the core rulebook and the Green Ronin supplements, they were top-notch, thanks to the design studio Super Unicorn. The colors popped, the character design was consistent, and the art was just evocative. Good art really does accentuate a solid tabletop role-playing game. A couple of years had passed, and the second edition of Mutants Masterminds was announced. The changes from the first to the second edition were very significant. Attack bonus was decoupled from strength and dexterity. Skills were priced more appropriately, especially since there were more skills this time around. New powers were added, and powers in general were more comprehensive than ever before. There was even a table that started to standardize units of measurement for stuff like speed, mass, and time. And the art direction was so unfortunate. Super Unicorn was no longer doing the art for Mutants and Masterminds products published by Green Ronin, and it was such a shame. The art direction was just all over the place. A good number of illustrations were just flat out amateurish. There was a consistent team of superheroes that were illustrated doing stuff related to the content being described in the page, which was supposed to be part of a never published Mutants Masterminds setting called Metaphor, and this is in the first edition of Mutants Masterminds. However, in the second edition, while they used a lot of art related to the Freedom City campaign setting, it was very off-putting looking at various poor designs of the Freedom League, which they were like the Justice League of the setting. It was akin to seeing their reflections in a funhouse mirror. There were also illustrations that had nothing to do with the Freedom City setting, which was a step down from the art direction from Mutants Masterminds first edition. I realize I'm taking a dump on the overall art direction of Mutants Masterminds second edition core rulebook, but that's just how I feel about it. Anyways, despite the art, over the course of the Mutants Masterminds second edition life cycle, I must have purchased the horror book like 4 times. 3 of those times was because of new printings incorporating a lot of errata into them. I bought the first, second, and fourth printing, and one was as a gift to either a friend or my brother, I forget which. I never got around to purchasing Freedom City second edition, even though I really wanted to for the new characters that were introduced and the updated character write-ups, because honestly the cost just wasn't really worth much for like the redundancy. I did, however, get to use my Freedom City first edition book for a gaming group that I did have from early 2010 to around the summer of 2012. We rotated our games weekly, so when it was my turn to run a game, I ran Mutants Masterminds second edition. I was the young buck of the group, and the next youngest person was 3 years older than I was. Of the many things that I appreciated with this group, one of the things I greatly appreciated was their willingness to play different games, not just Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition or Pathfinder when that came out. Regarding our Mutants and Masterminds games, we played in a version of Freedom City where it wasn't just the Centurion who had sacrificed his life to stop the universal threat of Omega, but the rest of the Freedom League died fighting off Omega's invasion of Freedom City. 5 years had passed, and the PCs were a new team, the Vanguard. Yeah, I know, not original at all. So, from my player group, Jim played a sorcerer called Demon who used demonic magic. Laura played an aquatic humanoid who had water-based powers, although I don't remember her name, her character's name. Gary played a speedster who smoked weed so that he can slow down his mental process to match our passage of time, and I don't remember his character's name as well. David played a Casey Jones knockoff called Mask, and I don't remember what kind of character Alan played. It's like on the tip of my tongue. and honestly, I hate it when stuff like this happens. I mean, it's been like what, 10 years since I've had contact with these people. Well, that's a story for another time, but you know, just it wasn't a bad falling out, you know. It's just some tragedy happened in my life at the time. So overall, I ran less than a dozen sessions of Mutants Masterminds with them, and they were mainly self-contained sessions. I did run one published adventure where they had to disarm 4 time bombs in different dimensions, like the one where the Nazis won the war and where the people of Earth were all apes, and that was pretty fun. I also remember running a session where each character was body swapped with another, and they all had to pass their character sheets to the person to the left. I'm not sure how much they truly hated that, but I found it very amusing. The last adventure I ran with them had them transported to a medieval version of Freedom City, and their trappings changed to match the land. So Mask wore an iron mask instead of a hockey mask, and he had a sack full of actual weapons instead of golf clubs and baseball bats. Demon didn't change whatsoever, while the others changed into either mages or rogues. That session ended with the Adrian Eldritch of their timeline taking the place of the Adrian Eldritch that was killed in this medieval Freedom City by Malador the Mystic, and Demon became the new Sorcerer Supreme. I really pigeonholed that ending though, offering them a hero point in exchange for Malador automatically killing medieval Adrian Eldritch, and the group was not satisfied with that level of railroading. Lesson learned. With that being said, stay tuned for the next episode, where I talk some more about Mutants Masterminds 2nd Edition, the Paragons campaign setting, and the transition to its 3rd and still current edition. Take care, folks, and play to find out what happens.